What would make this an especially useful conversation for you today?
Essentially, right now I just took my 6 out of 10 LSAT class from ETC test prep. I'm basically nearing the end of that. So I'm trying to make a plan as to what I'm going to do next. And I'm starting to learn what I'm weaker at, what I'm stronger at, and just trying to stay above water because some of this material is getting pretty hard. So basically, like my next step, I have an overall plan here to take the LSAT in April is my goal. So I've got like 6 months of a good amount of time. I just want to utilize my time wisely. So yeah, a plan.
Sure. Well, it's great that you're allowing so much time to study for this exam. You know, even if you were starting from scratch right now for April, that would be a very good amount of time to achieve your fullest potential.
Awesome.
Now, where are you scoring right now and where do you want to get to?
Sure. So I took my first timed diagnostic this weekend, actually, and I got a 153. I would like to move, at least 10 points, but ideally high 160s, 170.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Great. So you're starting off in a good place and you want to get to a great place. I'd say the first thing is you really want to get a strong foundation in each of the sections of the exam. And I'm sure your course will give you a good overview, but you might want to take some time after that just to review all of the fundamentals from a different perspective, just to make sure that you really get how to solve each question type and what each one's asking you to do.
I think that's kind of what I'm struggling with. Like I see the instructor do it and I'm like, I got it. But then when I go to do it by myself, I don't really have it.
Yeah. Well, going to class alone isn't enough. That's like watching a video of someone else's perfect way to do it. Unless we're working with someone one-on-one, it's really up to you to hit the books on your own to make the most of everything you're covering. So if in one class they cover grouping games or ordering games, you should then go and do several games of each type, maybe even a dozen or two of each type to really solidify your understanding of that game and then seeing how it comes up in different contexts.
Sure. Is that going to make me faster? Because that's another thing I'm really worried about is time.
Yeah, it will make you faster. You get faster at things by getting better at them. And you get better at them by understanding how to apply the strategies and then on a deeper level, why the strategies themselves work. That's what helps you get 165 plus, is really coming to see the exam more from the test maker's perspective. But that requires you going into those questions and dissecting them.
Absolutely. And is there like a method of madness? So my goal right now is to spend at least 15 minutes a day. So one problem at least per day, ideally more, of course. What should I, if I do LR on Tuesday, should I do AR on Wednesday? Should I do reading comp on Thursday? Like, do you have recommendations as to like, not to, overwhelm yourself, but to still, like you said, dive deeper into these questions?
Yeah, sure. I'd say at the beginning, I like to recommend students focus on one particular question type for the majority. So maybe do half of your time on games one week and then a little bit on the other sections as well, just to rotate things and stay fresh. But I would have a particular focus each week or each day. And 15 minutes a day, that's like doing one game or one passage and then maybe reviewing it a little bit. But overall, for bigger study sessions, I would focus more and do several problems of the same type to really see the patterns.
Absolutely. And when you say review, so review as in try to understand why you got the answer right or wrong, like what, because I'm hearing review a lot, right? What is quality review?
Yeah. So that's really the biggest benefit of doing problems, is having the opportunity to figure out what you got wrong and why, or what gave you difficulty and why. And so review to me means you're sitting there with the problem and struggling through it untimed to dissect it. Meaning, let's say for logical reasoning, you look at the stimulus. Was it something in the stimulus that tripped you up? Was it complex language? Was it the word unless? Was it lots of conditionals? Was it the failure of the test makers to include conditional indicator words or evidence conclusion indicator words? And then figuring out how you could spot which one is which. What's the evidence? What's the conclusion? What's the necessary? What's the sufficient? And if it's not the stimulus, was it an unfamiliar question stem wording? Or most likely was it in the answer choices? And then for the choices, what was tempting about the wrong answer that made you pick it? And what ultimately makes it wrong? And what's discouraging about the right answer that pushes you away from it? And what ultimately makes it correct? So you have these traps of discouragement away from the right answer and traps of encouragement pulling you towards the wrong answer. And you've got to figure out which traps you are uniquely prone to falling for.
I did that. I was actually doing reading comp before our call. That's why I was like running a little bit late. And one question, I'm like, that answer is too obvious. And yet I picked it anyway. I'm like, the answers are never that obvious is what I'm learning. And yet I picked it anyway. So no, that really helps. And I was listening to some of your stuff too recently about how you advise like writing out your exact thought pattern. That's something I haven't begun doing yet that I think could really help.
Yeah, write it out, talk it out with a friend or a coach or a tutor, or even in class, you could bring some of your questions. Maybe they'll cover them there too. But you've really got to speak it out, because if you just look at the correct answer or you look at an explanation, it's too easy to say, I get it now and move on. You've really got to paraphrase it and put it in your own words. And a lot of times it is that little thing where the first half of the choice is right, but then there's one little word towards the end that makes it all wrong.
Absolutely. And I think you're touching on one of my particularly weaker areas is LR. I took like the most basic philosophy class to get my degree, and it's coming back to bite me because that's very hard for me.
It takes more time to master too than games, for sure. You know, games are especially perfectible, and especially with a timeline for 6 months, you can master them 100%. But reasoning does have those ambiguities of language, and there's many, many more patterns in logical reasoning than there are in games. So it takes more time to see more and more of them.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I'm, with the 6-month time frame, how often would you recommend to practice tests? And should every time I practice tests be timed?
I don't think you need to do timed exams yet, especially since you've been doing the course. I would say you could take a couple of months just to really solidify your foundation. And so you've been taking a course already, but maybe you want to look at some other resources too, like other books or videos, some other medium that you can do on your own, because time in class alone isn't enough. You've got to do the work on your end now as well. And so maybe take a few months, do a general overview of each section and each question type. Don't even worry about exams yet. And then see where your score stands after you do all this.
Yeah, because I like that advice, because I got kind of discouraged because I did a practice test and didn't time myself. I think I took almost 6 hours, so double the amount of time, right? And then I did the time diagnostic, and there was I dropped 7 points. So when I didn't time myself, I got a 160. And when I did the diagnostic online and it was timed, I got a 163. So I think there was some discouragement there. So I think that's probably pretty useful to get a foundation of these question types. I think it's identifying the question type, especially in LR. I'm having a really hard time identifying exactly what they're at, like the type of question.
Yeah, and so drilling by question type, which is one thing I recommend during this foundational period, that will help you see all the different minor wording changes they use to refer to a given question type. And for example, is a big difference between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. They're asking for very different things, but over time you could see the key words they use for each.
Yes, that's like exactly what we just learned about. Oh, man,
yeah.
Like, give me a second. This is really hard. And then that kind of brings me to, I am wondering, I know I shouldn't be focusing on time quite yet, but when I do, how much time should each question take? And then, because I'm hearing all these things about strategy, like, okay, there are at times you should just, guess a question and move on because there's no guessing penalty. What do you recommend as far as like time per question, and when do you know it's time to just guess, like on the real exam, of course?
Sure. So I actually don't recommend timing individual questions, period.
Okay.
You'd be sitting there with a stopwatch being like 110 versus 130. Is that bad? Reality, I would think more about just the section as a whole. Like for logical reasoning, I would aim to do the first 10 questions in about 10 to 12 minutes to build up a time bank to handle the tougher questions that come later in the section, because there is that general order of difficulty.
So it is always like that. These practice tests aren't just like I feel like it's taking off in an airplane.
Yeah.
It is like that on the real LSAT.
It is, yes. These are real exams that you're looking at. So yeah, exactly. It's gradually getting more difficult as you move through the section. It's a general order, not a perfect order. So number 17 could be harder than number 25. But on average, the earlier ones are going to be easier. So you do want to go through them more quickly than the average. Then games and passages, you could have an average of 8:45 per game or per passage, but that's only an average. Some might take 8 minutes, some might take 11 minutes, totally fine.
Okay. And then your strategy on, okay, like if you're really running into trouble, do you advocate guessing? I mean, because at some point you have to.
Yeah, so there's no guessing penalty, as you said, so you do want to bubble in something for every single question. You might do it at the 5-minute warning.
Okay.
Just so that way, that's your warning that time is going to run out soon. Maybe if you're way behind schedule, you would want to bubble in everything and then go back and attempt whatever you can.
And then I think with that too, as far as, timing and being worried, sometimes I just get so tripped up on like, I don't know the material. Like if it's a science passage, for example, and I'm like, okay, the conductor heats up the radioactive, like I get tripped up on the words. Do you have any recommendations as far as not getting kind of like lost in the gravity of like what's being explained when it's not my field?
Yeah, sure. I'd say just try to dumb it down and oversimplify it as much as possible. So if they have like some 3-syllable word, can you substitute your own 1-syllable word that a 5-year-old would understand? Or could you use an acronym of some kind to simplify it for yourself? A lot of times they do use overly technical language to describe very simple things. So practice that. And if you have an example that you want me to look at, just shoot me an email and I'll take a look at it for you. But yeah, there are always ways to dumb it down for yourself to make it more real world relatable and easier to get through.
That is awesome. Thank you. Yeah, there was one exactly yesterday. I'm like, I can't even get to the conclusion of this because I don't know what you're saying. Like, you might as well be speaking Mandarin to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Is how I felt with one of these LR questions. And then that's when I start to run out of time because I'm like, it's like perfectionist by nature. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to understand this. I'm going to get this. And then it's like, nope. Then I probably should just move on to something I can grab and go with.
For now, yeah, but that's something to practice for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. And then as far as, so like I said, I want to take the exam, the LSAT in April, and then apply in October. That gives me a few times if I need to retake. What is your opinion on retakes? I don't want to go into this thing like, oh, I'm going to have to retake it, of course.
Not that you would have to retake, but that it's an option for you. And I do recommend that you consider retaking because there's no downside. Law schools don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest. And so through luck alone, you might do a few points better. There's a margin of error or a score band of 3.5 points on each end. So let's say that you deserved a 160 and that was your true aptitude. You might get a 163 one day or a 157 the following day. But a 163 will open far more doors for you than a 160 would. So if you took it in April, got your 160, which is maybe what you deserved, but you retook in June and got a 163, you could apply and have a 163 and that would be awesome. So I would say that you consider retakes as an option, no matter what. Not that you should retake just for the sake of doing so, but if you have no official score on record yet, no takes on record yet, no cancellations yet, it's not a bad idea to retake, especially if you would still be able to apply at the very beginning of the cycle just the same.
Yeah, that's kind of that is my vision, to apply at the beginning of the cycle. Let me ask you, I don't know if this is like a super basic question because I'm only a month into this, but do the testing dates fill up? Like, when should I commit to the April 25th LSAT?
That's a great question. And this year has been somewhat unique in that they fill up really fast. It's like LSAC isn't making enough seats available in every major city in the country and then non-major cities too for some reason. It's like they don't want to have empty capacity. So that means that everyone gets stressed out or can't book their date. So I would say book it now. If you think that April is pretty likely for you, then book it now. You don't want to have to like drive 3 hours and stay in a hotel or fly somewhere else just to do it, you know?
It's stressful enough.
Yeah, really. So I would just say if you're thinking of April, you're like thinking way ahead of schedule compared to most people. So since April is like the last date available for booking right now, I would just lock it up and have it. And then when
Awesome.
registration opens, probably in the spring for the ones in June and beyond, consider booking one of those two.
That was actually going to be my very next question. The June and beyond will open in spring, you said?
Yeah, because the LSAC, their year runs from June to May. And so April is the last date of that year. But then in the spring, they will open all the dates for the following year. And so you can book June and July at that point, or one of them if you want.
Awesome. And then my understanding, I've got a good understanding of like the different sections and stuff. As far as the writing sample, is there practice I should be doing in regards to that? Because I know you do it online on your own now from everything I've read.
Right. Yes. You do it online on your own after the exam. It's no longer part of the actual official LSAT test date. They're not administering it anymore. And so I wouldn't worry about it for now. You could take the LSAT, master that, then a month later or a week later, do the writing sample if you want. It's not scored, but because it's typed, law schools are a little bit more likely to look at it than they otherwise would have been previously. But it's not scored, doesn't count. You could do a practice one if you want, but you really can't go wrong on it if you're giving it your best shot and have good writing ability.
Sure. And they time you just like online after.
They time you just the same.
Just the same. Okay, perfect. I was wondering about that. I think just I feel like, okay, I have all this time until I'm going to take it. I just want to know how to take most advantage of my time given, I work part-time, I have 2 kids, I'm married. Like I am not this typical student. That's why I think I gave myself 6 months because when I was doing some reading, I'm like, okay, you can study for the LSAT in 3 months. I'll probably need double the time.
Yeah.
Knowing my schedule. You know what I mean?
For sure. So I would say you might want to try one of my day-by-day study plans. Okay. Because they show you exactly what to be doing every single day over the course of your prep, which books to read, which LSAT exam problems to complete, and laying it out for you systematically so that you're mastering games, then reasoning, then reading comp, you're doing the easiest ordering, then the moderate ordering, then difficult ordering, then on to grouping. So easy to hard within each category to help you see those patterns.
I love that idea. Something, day by day. Exactly. Because like once this class ends, I don't want to just be like, okay, I'm done. Like it's taught me so much, but like you said, just sitting there for 3 hours and absorbing it isn't sufficient to get me to do it on my own.
Yeah. And if you're shooting for April, then the class is really just the beginning of exposing you to the material. But then if you really want to achieve your goal score, it's really a question of putting in the time to learn the material. And when you have other obligations, it's harder. So it's great that you're allowing yourself a longer timeline.
That's exactly what I use it for. Like, okay, this is going to force me to sit down for 3 hours, you know what I mean? And learn how to take this test and, strategies and what's on it and whatnot. But no, I like that day by day plan a lot. Sorry, I'm just glancing at my questions I wrote down for you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that answers. Oh, I do have a question. I don't know if this is permissible, but as far as the free material, you said you have a day-by-day study setup and recommendation. How do you feel about the Khan Academy free material?
Yeah, sure. I think it's good for general exposure. And of course, they have real LSAT questions, which is nice. But they do repeat the same questions over and over because they have a limited set that they're pulling from. So if you want something you like to use that's free, like when you have access to the internet and no other books, I think that's fine. But I think given that you already have taken a course, it might be a little bit too basic for what you need going forward.
Yeah, I saw some things on there that I've already seen in my course book. So I was like, I don't know if this is an unfair advantage, but then again, I'm like, I don't know if I even remember the answer because they're so complicated.
I think it's fine. If you're on a budget or you just have the internet and nothing else, that's fine. But I would suggest using more advanced material at this point since you're already doing a course.
Awesome. And then are there I don't know if this is a thing, like study groups or anything you recommend to connect with other LSAT students?
Well, I have the Facebook group.
Yes.
That's a great place to connect.
That's how I found you, was on Facebook.
Awesome.
Actually.
Great. Yeah. So I would say use that to find study partners either online or in person. One of the purposes of the group is to organize that. So feel free to make a posting there And then
Awesome.
if you're looking for more of my resources, one of the things that I include with my online courses are actually live online classes and Q&A sessions and group coaching as well. And so those provide some of those benefits of community and study partners and accountability as well.
Super cool. No, I'll definitely look into that because yeah, that's how I came across you, was on Facebook, and then I found your blog, and then I got your cheat sheet, and then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much material here. Like now I know where to go for some after class stuff when this ends in 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, of course, Candace. Awesome. Well, I'm really glad we connected today.
Likewise. Thank you. You gave me a lot of really good insight, and I feel like my timeline is like very manageable.
Glad to hear. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I would definitely say to focus on the one section at a time. So like if I'm doing, AR this week, focus on AR. Don't jump around, which is what I think I've been kind of doing. Just master section by section. And then I really got a lot of insight when you said, if I'm having trouble understanding a question because of the complicated wording, to break it down, make an acronym out of it. How would I explain it to my 7-year-old if I had to? Just like that. That really helps me because that intimidates me quite a bit in some of the LR and reading comp.
Awesome. Perfect, Candace. Well, it sounds like you know what to do. I'm glad we connected. Please keep in touch and let me know if you need anything at all as you move forward.
I sure will, Steve. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.